Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to tie another saltwater fly that's quite a old, faithful kind of pattern. The Clouser Minnow. It's very well known. It's a pattern that was developed by Bob Clouser, and I was fortunate enough to meet him. I think it was back in 2015 at the ICAST show in Orlando, in Florida, and it was a very brief meeting, but a very interesting person. Now, the Clouser Minnow was originally designed as a bass fly, and it became such a nice and versatile streamer pattern that it worked very well for saltwater and pretty much any predator. And it was tied in various different ways with different materials and quite big sizes as well. So much so that the guys tied them on 4.0 and 6.0 hooks there when they fish offshore and they fish over reefs with sinking lines and that sort of stuff when they need big hooks and big quite a bit of weight on them. And I fished them quite a bit like that as well with great success. Now I'm going to tie one on a 2.0 hook. I'm tying it on the Grip 21711 NSL size 2.0, which is just a high carbon steel hook and a nice size hook for streamers, especially when you fish estuaries and the surf and those sort of places for species with something like a 9-weight rod. It's pretty easy to cast. I'm using a brass dumbbell, a nickel dumbbell with painted eyes. And you just cover the hook shank with a bit of thread and then tie the eyes on with a figure of 8 technique to make sure they are quite tight and won't twist around the hook shank. And then you cover the hook shank a little bit backwards around there. You take your thread forward, and I'm going to tie it in 2 colors. There's 2 different colors, or it's generally a 2-color fly. I'm going to tie white and olive, and you take white bucktail. I'm going to use bucktail, which is the traditional or the original material that was used, and cut a bunch of bucktail. And it's a very simple, very easy fly to tie, especially when you're a beginner tyer. And you want to go and fish the salt, tie a bunch of Clouser minnows. It's very easy. It's they don't have to be too neat, and it's an easy pattern to learn, especially learning to tie dumbbell eyes on a hook and all those sort of techniques. Now you want it to be almost, well, about double the length of the hook, around there. Now what I normally do is I take the hook with the thread forward behind the eye and I tie down right behind the eye first, right there, right against the eye, so the bucktail would stand upright there. With everything, make sure everything is on the top. It doesn't spin around or move around the bend of or the shank of the hook. And you tie that down right there with a few wraps. Then you take your thread to behind the eye and you tie it down again right against the eyes with a few tight wraps. And what I do at this point is I lift my bucktail, the excess very short, so it's a little bit more difficult to trim that away. But you just trim that away with the scissors like that, and we'll come back to those ends and that part now. Then what he did was to wrap with open wraps, tie the bucktail down on on the hook shank, not around the bend. That's very important. You don't want the bucktail to point down. Just want to remove that one here, that's a bit of a problem. Tie that down there, and then you go forward again with those open wraps, and that is just to hold the bucktail down. Then underneath the hooks, the hook, you go forward again and one wrap over, so that you've got your thread in the front. Now at this point you can actually turn the fly around and tighten the vice a bit, and you can add flash. So I'm using a UV flash, which is the white color. UV flash, a very popular color, and I only tie a few strands in here. I will take like 2 or 3 strands and double them. And tie them the same length as the bucktail tail. So I will tie it in on the left hand side of the hook, on top of the hook, but pointing past my side of the hook bend. Tie that down with about 2 wraps. I don't know if Bob Clouser did this originally in the Clouser Minnow that he developed, but this is the way I do it. It's more important to know how the bucktail is tied on than what flash you add, because you can add flash pretty much at any point, wherever you like it. And you tie a few strands pointing past the other end. Now, at this point you can cut the excess, and you just make sure those wraps are nice and tight in there. Then you add your color. Now you can tie it in pretty much any color. You can tie it completely white. You can tie white and pink, white and blue, white and chartreuse. Those are the colors that work very well for salt. Estuaries, I like to use a little bit natural colors. Then I would tie white and tan. I would tie white and olive. For bass, we tie quite a few natural colors. You can tie white olives. Obviously the hook changes then, but you can tie white olives, white tans, white black, and then we also use them for tiger fish in South Africa, in the Zambezi River. Many of you will know know the flies for tigers and the colors for tigers, and for that we use black yellow, black orange, black red, orange yellow, all the fire tiger kind of color combinations. So it's a very versatile fly for many different fish species. Just get some olive bucktail ready here. And what I do is I just pull out all the short hair, and then grab those longer hair, pull them out, and just match them with the tips of the bundle again. So you've got that. Then this step, you cut the end nice and even. You only tie it in the front of the eyes, between the eye of the hook and the eyes of the fly. So you tie the bucktail the same length as the white tail that you tied in. Place that on top of the hook, and you tie that down right there. And I always match the thread color with the darker color that I'm tying in. And then you can cut this, and a trick if you didn't know this, lift the bucktail up perpendicular to the hook shank, and then cut level. When you do that, you'll get a kind of a tapered head that's easier to close in and wrap with the thread. Now I didn't really cut it short enough. I'll just cut it a little bit shorter, but it's definitely going to help to close that those bucktail ends in. There we go. I can pull that down. Now, if you want to, you can add a few strands of flash. I sometimes add a bit of crystal flash on top. And for this, I'm going to use just going to use a black UV crystal flash. A few strands. I'm going to grab 3 strands here, and again 3 on this side of the hook. You don't need much. I'm not crazy about too much flash in my flies. And you secure that, and then you fold it back. Just cut that one, it's a little bit long. Fold that back to the other side, and 3 strands on that side of the hook. And now you can finish it with a nice few wraps to finish that head. And I always make a few wraps towards the eyes first, to make sure that you tie it down right behind the eyes, and then you go forward and build that head up. And I'm using a flat wax thread, which is very easy to use. Now this is and then you can whip finish it. This is the traditional way of tying the Clouser minnow. I'm going to add a little bit of UV resin just to finish the head off nicely, and then I'll show you the other way of tying it. I'm using the grip thin UV resin. Cures hard and tack free. Put a nice layer of that on there. So I'm going to grab my light and cure that. Just like that, and you can put that aside. I always put my this is quite dry already. I always cure it just to set, and then once I've got a bunch of flies tied, I'll go and just put them in the sun. Otherwise you spend too much time with the torch on the flies. So that's what the fly looks like. It's the Clouser minnow, and that's pretty much the way that Bob Clouser tied it. And tie it on bass hooks as well if you're a keen bass fisherman. You can tie it instead of hackle on the tail, instead of bucktail on the tail, you can use hackle for the tail, especially when you tie very big ones for saltwater and you want a kind of a bulkier fly. But it's a very versatile and probably one of the best saltwater flies ever. So I'll put this aside, then I'm going to grab another hook. Same hook, same size. I'm going to tie it with exactly the same materials, just in a slightly different way. So the next fly I want to show you, which is it's some guys still call it Clouser minnow. It's not tied like the original Clouser minnow, but it's similar, same materials, and also a very successful bucktail streamer. And I'm doing it in the same video because the two flies are so similar. And this pattern, it started, I think it started in South Africa. I'm not sure who did it first, and I'm not sure when it started, but it wasn't very long ago. But I think it was within in the last 10-15 years. It's almost like a Crazy Charlie with an extended wing. So the tying sequence is, the materials are very much the same as the Clouser minnow that I just tied, but The tying sequence is very similar, if not exactly the same as a Crazy Charlie, but just with a much longer wing. And we, instead of using calf tail, we use bucktail or sometimes other synthetic fibers. So you tie it also with, you start with covering a little bit of the hook shank with thread behind the eye. Then you tie a dumbbell eye in. Again, I'm using the same dumbbell eyes as in the previous. I'm using exactly the same materials. Same hook, 21571 NSL size 2.0. Nickel plated medium sized dumbbell eye with painted eyes on it. And I'm using a olive flat waxed thread. Tie that on and cover, just tighten this a little bit, cover that hook shank not around the bend, just to where the bend starts, and then take your thread forward. This time we're going to wrap or cover the hook shank with the material. I'm using a grip pull braid olive, which is what I use on Crazy Charlies as well. You can use, again, there's so many different materials. If you want to cover it with chenille, you can do that. I just find that, especially when you tie this pattern for tigerfish, that little bit of extra flash works quite well. It looks very good as well. Take your thread forward in front of the eyes, and then same as the Crazy Charlie, if you watch the video that I did on the Crazy Charlie, you'll see that the sequence is very much the same. You tie, you cover that with that hook shank with a bit of glue. Just on top is fine, just to hold that material down, the pull braid down, and then use the rotary function in the vise to wrap that shank all the way to behind the eyes. The glue is going to come through, but that's fine, it will clear, it will cure clear. Unwind all those wraps there. And then same as the Crazy Charlie, from the back over the cross over the eyes, then one wrap behind, then forward again underneath, and one wrap cross over to the back, and then you tie it off underneath in front of the eyes, between the eyes and the hook of the eye, the eye of the hook, and secure it with one or two wraps, and then you can cut that away and just tie those tips in. So that's what you have. It's pretty much the same as a Crazy Charlie. It's still referred to as a Clouser Minnow in South Africa. Some people call it a Bucktail Clouser, if it's tied with Bucktail. Obviously, some people call it a Bucktail Minnow. It's got a few different names. Instead of calf tail, we're going to use a Bucktail, and you select a small bunch of white Bucktail. I think this is where the difference, besides the fact that it's got a longer wing, is this is where the difference between the Crazy Charlie and this fly comes in the tying sequence, is that we're going to use two colors of Bucktail, same as the Clouser Minnow again, and same length as in the previous Clouser. You do it about double the length of the hook. Tie that down right there. Cut that excess away. can apply a little bit of glue on that bucktail just to bind it a little bit, and then cover those ends with your thread and tie it all the way against the ice. You know, your thread wraps all the way against the ice. So I'm going to use the same flash. I'm going to use a peacock UV flash. Take about 3 strands. And tie. Now with this pattern you can tie a little bit of a flash tail by tying it a little bit longer than the bucktail. 3 strands on this side. Tie it down, fold it back on the other side of the hook and just tie that in. Very easy. And now you're going to take your other color bucktail. So I'm going to use olive again. Select a small bunch. So it's very much the same. The only difference is that you don't tie the bucktail against the shank along the shank of the hook. You tie it, everything is in the inside of the hook. There, same length as the white. Put it on top of the white and tie that down right there. And then you cut that excess away as well. Cover that with a little bit of glue and tie those ends in. Just like that, and you whip finish that. Now that's the way that even commercially when we tie Clouser minnows, this is the way we tie them. You can cut that and then cover that with a UV resin. So you grab your UV resin, cover that head, give it a good coat. And zap it with a light, and that's it. So there's two different styles. It's the original Clouser minnow, the way Bob Clouser tied it. I think, I'm not sure if he tied flash on the inside and on top of the wing, but the tying sequence is pretty much the same. And then there's this way, and I must say I quite like this one. I think there's more movement in this fly because the white bucktail is not trapped against the shank of the hook. There's quite a lot of movement. Both of them are very easy to fish. Both of them are very good bass and saltwater flies, and you can definitely tie some on a bass sting hook like the grip 30012 in a few different sizes, and go and fish them for bass in different colors. Bass, tigers, for saltwater. Match the colors, do natural colors, do dark ones, do orange and yellows for tigers, do black and olives, grey and black. Those are also all good colors. And then saltwater, white and tan, white pink, white blue, white red, white chartreuse. Those are the kind of colors for saltwater. So give them a try, tie them, leave a comment, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with more. Thanks for watching.